has written a very important book, Because They Hate. A survivor of Islamic terror warns America. Brigitte, you talk about being a survivor. You spent 7 years hiding out in a bomb shelter in southern Lebanon. Tell us about that.
When I was 10 years old, that's when my 9/11 happened to me. The Muslims bombed my home, bringing it down and burying me under the rubble, wounded as the perpetrators shouted, Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town. I ended up wounded. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And while I was laying in a hospital, I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I knew since I was 10 years old that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith. This is something very difficult for American Christians to understand, because we Christians in this country wake up freely, have the freedom to practice our religion, go to church, never have to worry about having police guards protecting us just to be able to conduct the prayer service. Our idea of persecution in America,
for that matter.
Exactly. Our idea of persecution in America is somebody looked at me funny if I brought my Bible to work. However, with people like me in Lebanon and what the Christian went through, our lives turned upside down. I left the hospital and I came back home, but my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living with my parents in a bomb shelter underground with no electricity, no water, and very little food. To get some food, we would crawl under the bombs around our bomb shelter and dig out different vegetations and different grass that grew around the bomb shelter. We would dig out dandelions and different types of vegetations and even thorn. I learned how to peel thorn in my tender young fingers at age 10 and 11 and 12 so I can eat the stalk that grew inside of the thorn. That was the only greenery we had. My mother used to soak rice and chickpeas and lentils and anything dry that was bombed from our house. And we would bring it to the bomb shelter, and my job was to sit in a little tray and pick up the broken glass from the bombs, from the rice and the chickpeas, so we can soak them and we can eat them green. We had nothing to cook them with. And my job was to break the chickpeas in half and with a needle take the ants out and the bugs to put them aside so we can eat the food. That was the only food we had. To get some water, we would crawl to a nearby spring under snipers' bullets just to get a drink of water. My town, Marjayoun, got its name because it meant Valley of the Springs. We had 8 springs in our town. And we used to go under snipers' bullets to fetch some water, where my mother had to use her stocking on top of the bottle of water to get all the worms and the rocks and the maggots and the algae so we can drink the water. And then we used to crawl back.
My goodness.
In a ditch. And what used to take us, what's supposed to be a 5-minute walk to the spring, used to take us 5 hours just to come back to the shelter. And every single time before we left, we would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead.
And you lived like this for how long?
For 7 years, from age 10 to age 17. I remember at age 13 years old, after 3 years, we had resigned ourselves to our fate. We realized that no one in the world was paying attention to us. I remember at age 13 years old, we had gotten a word that we were going to be slaughtered that night. A friend of ours from the Christian militia stopped by and he said, Brigitte, I just want to let you know that we heard on the radios that we're going to be attacked tonight by the Muslims. And if we die tonight, he said, I don't think we're going to last. I want to wish you a merciful death. And if I don't see you tomorrow, I just want to say goodbye. And he left.
Goodness.
And I remember at age 13 years old, putting on my Sunday best, my Easter dress, because I wanted to look pretty when I'm dead, knowing that there would be no one to bury me. And I remember praying with my parents. We had a ceasefire for 1 hour, and I remember my mother combing my long black hair and tying a white ribbon in my hair that matched the flowers in my dress. And I was just crying uncontrollably, begging her, I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old. I don't want to die. And there was nothing my mother could say to me. And I remember sitting in the corner of our bomb shelter, and we had nothing but hope and our faith. And we held each other's hands, and we said the Lord's Prayer. And my parents said to me, when they come to kill us tonight, we will create a distraction, and you just run towards Israel, and you never look back. Because we lived a long life. You see, I was an only child to my parents. My parents were married for over 22 years. They couldn't have any children. My mother had me, she was 55 years old, and my father was 60.
Goodness. Wow.
I was the miracle in their lives.
I should say so.
When I was 10, 13 years old, they were in their 70s. Thank God I didn't have to make that decision that night and leave them alone, because that's the night Israel came in physically into Lebanon and kicked away the Islamic army and the Palestinians away from our town and established the security zone. While the world was asleep and the Christians were not paying attention to what was happening to the Christians in Lebanon, it was the Jews and the IDF who came to shed their blood to save the Christians in Lebanon while the Christian world slept.
Now, didn't you, even though you were Arab and Christian Lebanese, didn't you consider Israel the enemy?
Well, when I was a child, under the age of 10, and of course I don't remember much, and under the age of 10, we as a Christian, raised in a Christian home, I was not taught to hate, because we Christians do not teach hatred, we teach love and forgiveness. However, being raised with a majority Muslim country at that point when I was a child in the 70s, all they talked about was their hatred to Israel, because Israel was supposedly the enemy of Lebanon at that time. See, we in Lebanon, being such a small country and being swallowed by a sea of Muslims around us, the Christians thought that if we befriend the Muslims, if we suck up to the Muslims and identify with the Arabic world, that will buy us protection points. That will buy us brownie points with the Arabs. How fool our government was. How fool we were to think that. Because when the Arabs started slaughtering us, nobody paid attention to us and nobody came to our protection except for the Jews. We ended up surviving after Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, and the only reason Israel invaded Lebanon was because Syria and Iran had gotten involved in the war in Lebanon. And Syria used Lebanon as